Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today I want to talk about, and speculate I guess, some massive changes that could be coming to the mid-game in the near future. Now, I want to be very clear, this is speculation, but I'm going to be backing this up with some deductive reasoning, with some things that have been kind of going on in the background that I think when we put them all together, it could lead to some big changes to make the mid-game easier, to speed up your farming progress, to get to that point where you are able to more able to more effectively play this game and not feel like you are just so far behind and so out of it. So let me know your thoughts, guys. Do you see this stuff going on? If you had these thoughts, do you think that they're never going to do that because that would be idiotic? You let me know. I want to hear it regardless. Let's give a shout out to our channel members for their continued support. If you're ever interested, link down below, along with a link to the Discord. Guys, that's where, you want a roster review, even if I'm not live streaming, that's what these guys do. Just DM me, join the Discord, get the members only section, ask away. It's what it's there for. Thank you guys for using it. Let's get into the video here. Let's speculate on some changes. Alright guys, so as I said, there are some changes that I think could be coming to the mid-game. And a lot of this is driven because when we think back to the, the bonus drops that are coming, and I said this in my bonus drop video when I was kind of analyzing these drops, I said they didn't really help the mid-game, or they didn't really help the end game. Like, I don't need Kyrotech, I don't need Zetas, I don't need Omegas. They're not anything major for me. I would need signal data, relic materials. So I found it very interesting that the resources that you were going to get didn't really help me in the end game. And also the characters that they chose are all ones that I would say in my guild, I think every single person has them bare minimum 7-star looking at someone like Fulcrum. But for Cal, Seer, and Ninth Sister, I guarantee you more of us have them at relics than not. Especially Seer and Ninth Sister because of special missions, and then Cal just because he's like a good character. But I found that very interesting. Like, that's not a massive surprise that they're giving out characters that don't really help the end game players. And this is the kind of stuff that will make the difference for the mid game. One of the biggest challenges that this game has is putting things in place to help a mid game player that also doesn't inevitably help those of us in the end game. And I'm going to show you guys a great example from the Lightspeed bundles. When you go back to the Lightspeed bundles that were, and it's been about a year, so I'm going to have a whole video kind of talking about, 1 year removed. But I had bought the Rey bundle. So I got these resistance characters right here, these first 7. I got those resistance characters from the bundle. And I did this all on live stream. So if you're ever curious, you could go back and watch me do this live on stream. I then geared up BB-8, Finn, Vetsmug Chewie, and Reysk and Scavray. I geared up all of them, did their relics, and then started Rey's journey that very night. So when you think about that, they released this bundle that's meant to help you catch up, and yet day one I did, bought one part of the bundle, didn't even buy the other one, like just bought one part of it, smashed gear onto 4 characters, started a journey. That is crazy. And that's kind of why I think that, these Lightspeed bundles after the Rey and Kylo ones were for things that I would say were a little bit less valuable to those of us in the late stages. There was still some very good things. You had that Phoenix bundle that was very good, but many players had them at relic levels already. That a lot more of the recent bundles were for things that many players in the end game already had. So it didn't give quite the advantage that, like, a Rey was a GL that very few people had. So a lot of players got that, and I think they saw that and corrected it in the future where they weren't going to give out a GL that potentially gives those of us up here in the end game that advantage. Because, like, what I was missing for Rey was just gated by the time. That I didn't have the time to work on that faction. Not that I didn't have the gear. I didn't have the time to devote to them when everything else was happening. But you're going to give me all that stuff, boom, good to go, right? So that's an example of where they tried something and I think it didn't, the Lightspeed bundles were a smashing success and I think they're one of the best packs. But in terms of just helping the mid game, they did not do that with that first set. I think in some of the more subsequent sets, they absolutely did. But you think back to some of the other big changes that have come to the game to make that middle part of it easier. And you go all the way back to the introduction of Kyrotechs, right? Because this was a big moment. When they introduced Kyrotech, the whole point of these things was that they were meant to be the new bottleneck. And that didn't happen for a while. And what they ended up doing was they said, okay, you know what? We're going to accelerate character shards. If you've been in the game for over a year, you're going to get 2 times drop rates. So they, because everybody was short on character shards, that you didn't get bottlenecked by Kyrotech because you spent so much time farming character shards. So they increased the character shards. And when they did that, very quickly, and after that, what players realized is it didn't matter that I had all these character shards. I don't have the core gear for them. I don't have all these stun, the droid collars, stun guns, Carbani, stun cuffs, all of those things got so incredibly challenging to obtain because you had all of these characters to level up and no gear to give them to. So it really kind of drove a lot of us to be like, man, doesn't matter that I have all these characters, I don't have any gear to equip to them. And so what that inevitably did is it killed the Kyrotech bottleneck because it didn't matter. I had plenty of Kyrotech, I didn't have enough Carbanis. And then you had time to accumulate your signal data and your relic materials because you were stuck on these stupid Carbanis. So then they went and they did their gear change, where they updated the challenges to include more core gear. They double dropped it on nodes. They made it, they doubled it in terms of how much you bought in the stores. When they did that change, Kyrotech became the bottleneck that we know and love. But it took months for that to happen. So they made these changes and then saw the impact and then reacted to get their desired result. And I think with the Lightspeed bundles and with the changes they made much more recently to the new player experience, the early game experience, and the changing of some of these stores, it's very much looking like the next avenue they're going to go down is, okay, we fixed, the easy, we fixed the beginning, now we've got to go to the middle. If you've been living under a rock, maybe you haven't seen this, one of the big changes was the Hyperdrive bundle. There's new characters here. Look at the characters inside of this Hyperdrive bundle. It's not just these characters that we were used to seeing. They added in Moff Gideon, Dark Trooper, Dengar, Boss, Captain Rex, Royal Guard, Grief, and Mando. Those are some huge changes to the characters. Every single one of those characters is very, very good. Mid-game, early game, late game, those are all characters. I can tell you that I use, Dark Trooper, not so much, but, Grief, Captain Rex, Boss, Royal Guard, Grief, Mando, those are characters I use all the time. And then in the ships, they kept all the original ones, but they added in Rebel Y-Wing, Jedi Knight Anakin ship, TIE Bomber, TIE Advance. That's huge. That was adding ships, ships is the hardest thing to farm in this game, to give you more of them. And not just to give you more. It's not just that they gave you those ships. Think, they're getting it at level 80 too, so there's a ton of ship credits and ability materials included in those ships. So they really ushered you along much more quickly, right? You could almost view this Hyperdrive bundle as like an Executor bundle for how much of a benefit it's giving you towards Executor. But along with that, they even updated some of the stores. They added Embo and Kit Fisto, which I know that's not huge, but they added them here. They've even added a little bit of gear down here, which this stuff's really nice. But I think the biggest change is the Galactic War Store. They added an extra ship slot. They added Hera and, Mando went in here. You're looking at Wedge went in here. The Night Sister characters, Omega, Jahani. They added some very good characters inside of this store here. And then obviously the big increase is coming here. But what this did is it allowed that early part of the game to progress a lot faster, gave you access to things that otherwise took a lot longer. And with that, it's getting you into that mid-game area faster. So they've seen the impact of these changes in the game. They can see what it's doing. And then it brings up hey, what's going to happen in the mid-game now? So through all those changes, you can begin to see that there could be something coming because they've constantly followed up these changes with something else. That they don't just call it good and, call it a day. Think when they updated this raid system, when we first got the Crate Dragon raid, when they axed the Challenge Pit raid, they gave us the Crate Dragon raid, a lot of changes came through. Some of them good, some of them bad. One of the bad was we complained that it was too often, that you were constantly playing this raid, constantly running it. So they changed it. They updated the cost to be significantly more and just gave you double the rewards, right? That okay, you only have to run this, say, once a week now, and you'll get the same rewards that you used to do running it twice a week. That was a great change, but it took them a little bit to get that feedback and then even see the impact of the raid. Like, with this rotating raid schedule, was it doing what they wanted? Was it allowing players to progress faster? Because they didn't just change that raid, but they changed the way you spend the gear and the rewards along with it. And that was what they were probably looking at to see, is this the change that we want out of it? So, with all of those things in mind, all of these changes that have come to the game, what could you potentially expect? And the bonus drops that I was showing earlier, I think give a pretty good idea as to what you could expect here. Kyrotechs, Zetas, Omegas. Those are three things, and I include, whenever I talk about Kyrotech, I want to be very clear. Even though here they break out Mark 7 and Mark 9, I view Kyrotech as a single entity. Like, the way you can view Kyrotech, I think the best, healthiest way to view Kyrotech is together, right? That I don't go here and say, I've got 2,875 of these, and I've got 2,700 of these, right? I know, flex. Like, I look at this and say that I've got, like, over 5,000 Kyrotech. I view them together. And that's the way you got to do it. You got to view them together, because let's say that you get a lot of Mark 9 Kyrotech. Well, that just means that all of your farming and your store purchases can go towards the Mark 7 Kyrotech, and vice versa, right? So you just view them together and you'll be a lot more successful. But as I'm kind of showing you the amount that I have, these kind of Kyrotech, this issue or whatever you want to call it, shows you that in the end game, Kyrotech are not this big problem for us. If you doubled the amount of Kyrotech I have, not really helping me all that much. It helps, but only to the extent that I can, get some characters to like Relic 0, Relic 1, but I still need a ton of signal data. So Kyrotech would be a really good thing that they could potentially change. I just don't know they're ready to do that, because they do serve a very good purpose. But there's also those Zetas and Omegas. And this is where I think they really have potential to make a change. So with Zetas in particular, Omegas would have to increase along if they increase Zetas. But with Zetas, they're not something that is very whalable. When you look in the store now, there's 2 packs I can get Zetas in. I can get 10 Zetas here in this $60 pack, and I can get 10 Zetas via the Hyperdrive bundle. So I spend over $100, I get a whole bunch of other stuff, and I get some Zetas. But then you look at the other places you can get them, and they're all kind of gated by time. They're like Kyrotech and shards are paywalled, right? Or pay gated. The only thing stopping you from getting more of them is, are you willing to spend the money? Where Zetas, what's really stopping you is the time. If you don't believe me, ask anybody who's a mega whale, and they will flat out, as long as they're I'd say a cool, honest one. Like, I've met a bunch of them where they'll say, yeah, the only thing I can't whale on is Zetas. And you all saw that with the Lightspeed bundles, that you haven't been able to really purchase Zetas. So what I think you could do is just keeping the structure of Zetas the same, that they're walled by the amount of time you've played the game, but you could potentially either, I don't know that you could double the challenges. I feel like that would be extreme, because you get 2 Zetas every single instance of the ship ability materials challenge, right? Every single time this event comes around, you can get 2 Zetas in tier 3 or tier 4. So just, you get a Zeta each time, so you figure if you do that 3 times a week, that's 6 Zetas a week, over 52 weeks, you're looking at over 300 Zetas a year. Just from this event, that's 15 total Zetas, right? It takes 20 Zeta mats, you're going to get over 300 of them, you're going to get over 15 Zetas. So if you doubled the Zetas here, you're looking at over 600 some odd Zeta mats, like 31 total Zetas. It's a lot. That's excessive. And very quickly then Zetas lose a lot of their value. So maybe you give us an extra attempt at all of the ship challenges, and that way you could get 3 Zetas per instance. So you increase the Zetas by 50%. which is like enough, right? That's a good amount. You'll be able to progress faster, but not at a breakneck speed that potentially ruins everything else you're doing. Because they definitely can't just have you walking into this game and getting to 10 million GP in 2 years. They don't want that. They want slow, steady progression, but I think they do have to recognize that the demands on the mid-game player is much higher now. You know, Conquest is one of the best areas to see that in. When Conquest first started hard mode, Sector 1 was Gear 12 characters. And now it's what? Relic 5s? Relic 4s? Relic 5s? Like, it's substantially more challenging than it was when it first, was introduced. But the cost of admittance is still 4 million galactic power. And 4 million GP today is not what 4 million GP was when Conquest was introduced in, like, was it 2021 or 2020? Can't quite remember. I think late 2020. So Zetas would be a big area. The last thing that I think they could do is update the rewards in raids to be structured. I want my wording here. I have the way in my head. That in raids, they need to update the reward structure to recognize or put more importance on a raid for mid-game guilds. What I mean by this, if you go back to the speeder bike raid, you can no longer earn Mark III raid currency. But if you look at this third box, you're going to get 9,700 of these and 17,000 Mark I, right? So there's your currencies for the speeder bike raid. If you come to the Naboo raid, you go to that third box, you're getting slightly less Mark I raid currency, the same amount of Mark II, and you're earning the Mark III. So the fault here is there's no benefit to your guild of building the characters needed in that speeder bike raid anymore. In terms of raid benefit, there's zero. There's no reason that you would ever tell your people, hey, go invest in Death Trooper and Stormtrooper, and some of these are good characters in their own rights, but you're not going to tell somebody to make these investments when these characters are what's required for this raid. Because the rewards are the same. Like, there's no benefit to scoring better in the speeder bike raid than in the Naboo raid, right? Whereas, like, let's say that your guild was going to get to this 125 million bucks. Like, you get a few more Mark I and Mark II. But what if this was significantly more? Like, what if for maxing out this raid, I know that's a crazy, or maybe we come to, like, here. What if getting here, you could earn, like, 25,000 Mark I raid currency and 15,000 Mark II raid currency? Would that be more valuable to you as a guild rather than getting, 1,500 Mark III raid currency? Because while Mark III raid currency is nice, how many of you actually are able to utilize these resources to their fullest extent? Like, be honest. How many of you are actually able to utilize these to their fullest extent? I guarantee most of you are just buying arrow magnifiers, right? Like, this is not moving your needle in any significant way. But if you were getting a lot more of these and having more access to some of these resources, would that progress you along faster? Would that allow you to make those moves, the extra credits, the extra, resources to get relic characters, and put you in the position that you can build your account to go after that Naboo raid with the confidence that, hey, you know what? We built this Naboo raid up. They're gonna, we're not gonna get the Mark III raid currency anymore, but we are gonna be able to earn more Mark I and Mark II currency to prepare our rosters to compete in this new raid. So that would be another change that I think could be effective and encourage people to actually participate with the older raids, because there's no reason for anybody to ever go back to these raids. And I feel that is a huge missed opportunity for this game. So those are just my kind of speculating on changes coming and what I think they could do. Let me know your thoughts. What do you guys want to see? And before you say, oh, I want more of this, and I'll make a video and kind of respond in the comments that I see here. But think that whatever change they make, you do not want it to have a massive impact on the end game. Because if there's any impact on the end game, all that's going to happen is that gap is going to grow. So keep that in mind. I love you all. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.